In part 1, they saw me as a burden, the one who stayed behind, doing the quiet work no one wanted to see. I uncovered the truth they tried to hide, and for the first time, I stopped apologizing for surviving. Now, in part 2, everything falls apart. And so does the version of family I once believed in. The letter came in a plain white envelope. No return address, just my name. Typed, not handwritten. That made it feel colder, like a summons. I didn't open it right away. I stood at the mailbox, sunlight slanting across the cracked driveway, and just stared at it. I already knew what it was. When you grow up learning how to read people, really read them, you start to feel the truth before it's said out loud. This was a warning, wrapped in civility, folded in legal paper. I walked back into the house and set the envelope on the kitchen table, next to my half-drunk coffee and a stack of old utility bills that weren't even mine anymore. The air in the room changed the second it hit the table. Heavier, thicker, like it was waiting for me to break. Eventually, I opened it. Probate Court. Notice of pending review regarding contested estate allocation. Petition filed by Rachel Whitaker. Filed 2 days ago. There it was. Not even a phone call, not a conversation. Just petitioned. Quietly. Legally. Like I was some stranger she'd never known. Like I hadn't sat next to her on 100 Thanksgiving nights watching her pretend to like cranberry sauce. She wanted the box. She wanted the money. But more than that, she wanted the story. The one where I was the manipulator. The one where she was the victim. The one where Dad was weak, and I was the reason for everything that fell apart. I sat down slowly. My hands weren't shaking. That scared me more than if they had, because it meant I wasn't shocked. Somewhere inside, I'd been expecting this since the day I read his letter. The next few hours passed in a haze. I tried to eat something. Couldn't. I opened my laptop, closed it again. I stared out the window, where the wind was bending the branches of the old oak in the front yard, and that's when the text started. Cousin Megan. Hey, Buzz. Just heard something about the will. Is everything okay? Emily from high school. Saw something online about your family. Hope you're all right. Wild stuff. My former co-worker, Tina. I don't mean to be rude, but did you really get the whole estate? Just curious, lol. They all said they cared, but none of them asked how I was. They just wanted the gossip. They wanted to watch it unfold like a TV show they didn't even have to pay for. By sunset, I hadn't responded to a single message. I went outside, sat on the front steps, wrapped in an old cardigan that still smelled like cedar, and I watched the sky change. That used to be something Dad and I did together. Back when watching the sky was still sacred. Back when silence didn't feel like punishment. A woman walked by with her golden retriever. She smiled politely, but it wasn't polite. It was thin, fragile, like she didn't know what to say, but felt like she should say something. So instead, she just smiled, like she already believed the worst of me. I smiled back. Because that's what you do when they've already decided you're the villain. Later that night, I sat in bed with the court notice beside me. I read it again, and again. Each time the words looked smaller, less real, but the feeling they left behind was unmistakable. Isolation. The kind of isolation that doesn't scream. It whispers. It says, "You should have seen this coming." And the worst part, I did. I just didn't want to believe it. I picked up my phone and hovered over Evan's number. I didn't call, because I already knew what side he'd be on, and I wasn't ready to hear him say it out loud. Instead, I put the notice back in the envelope, tucked it into the drawer next to Dad's letter, and whispered to the dark room, "You said I didn't fail this family, but I don't think they ever gave me the chance." The next morning, I woke up angry. It was the kind of anger that doesn't explode. Not yet. It just simmers, low and constant, like a stove burner left on under a pot that hasn't boiled over yet. My hands felt tight. My jaw ached from clenching all night. I made coffee I didn't drink, stared at the court notice again like it might change if I read it upside down. And then I drove to the bank. The lobby was cold. Not just temperature-wise. It had that kind of corporate chill. Marble floors, brushed steel trim, fake smiles behind bulletproof glass. The receptionist was polite, until she saw my name. Then her smile stiffened just slightly. "Of course," she said. "Let me check with the branch manager." She returned 10 minutes later, still smiling, but with eyes that didn't match. "I'm sorry, Ms. Whitaker. Due to the pending legal challenge, we can't allow you access to the contents of the safe deposit box at this time." I blinked. "I'm the name on the box." "Yes, but given the claim against the estate, the claim is from someone who doesn't have the key, the paperwork, or the right." "I understand, but—" "No," I snapped, voice louder than it should have been. "You don't understand." People were staring now. The woman behind me, older, lavender blouse, pearls too tight around her neck, took a step back like I might go full explosion. Maybe I would. "I'm not here to steal something," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "I'm here to find out why my father gave this to me, and you're letting people who were never around in his last months decide what I'm allowed to know." The manager approached, a thin man with thinning hair and the kind of tie that screamed regional authority. He listened, he nodded, and then he said, "Legally, we can't give you access today. I'm truly sorry." That was it. No discussion, no compromise. Just, sorry. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. But halfway through the parking lot, I turned back and slammed my hand against the glass door so hard it echoed. Everyone turned, even the manager. I didn't say anything. I just stared at him. And then I left. I sat in my car for 15 minutes, shaking. The anger wasn't just about the bank, or Rachel, or even Evan. It was all of it. The years I stayed, the things I gave up. The time I watched Mom forget my name. The nights I held Dad's hand as he cried because he knew he was dying. And now they were painting me as the thief. I drove aimlessly for a while. Ended up at a gas station just outside of town. Bought a pack of gum I didn't want, just to do something with my hands. Then I drove home. Still buzzing, still burning. I didn't go into the house. I went to the garage. The freezer was still there, the old one, white and rusting, with duct tape across one corner. Dad used to keep venison in it from hunting trips with Uncle Charlie. Now it just held old frozen dinners, frostbitten lasagnas, and the kind of ice cream you buy when you're sad and then forget to eat. I opened it, stared at the contents, then slammed it shut hard enough to rattle the shelves. The fire came after, not literal fire, but the kind that makes you throw a mug against the kitchen wall. The kind that makes you rip open old drawers and toss out junk mail and stomp on broken picture frames that once mattered. The kind that makes you scream into a pillow until your voice cracks. Not because you want anyone to hear, but because if you don't let it out, it'll eat you. And then, in the middle of that storm, it happened. A memory. I was maybe 10. Sitting at the kitchen table with my knees pulled up to my chest. Mom and Dad were fighting in the next room. Not yelling, not loud, but sharp, like words spoken through gritted teeth. I couldn't hear every sentence, but I caught pieces. "She's too soft. She feels everything too much. She won't survive in this family. You're wrong. She sees it all. That's what scares you." And then Dad walked in. He saw me, walked over slowly, sat down next to me, and he said something I hadn't remembered until that moment. Some people inherit land, Claire. Others inherit silence. I didn't understand it then, but now I knew. He'd been trying to tell me that this family would never give me what I deserved. Not openly. They'd pretend, smile, pass down furniture, and guilt and expectations and empty apologies, but never truth, never thanks, never the story as it really happened. And so, He gave it to me in pieces. A key, a box, a letter, a memory, like breadcrumbs for the kid he knew would never stop looking for the way out of the woods. I sat on the floor of the hallway until it got dark. The house creaked around me like it was remembering too. And I whispered to no one. You knew. You saw what they couldn't. And you left me the map. I should have known it was coming. The call. I felt it hours before it happened. Like the air changed pressure. Like I could sense the blame crawling toward me through the phone lines. It came just after 9:00 p.m., right when I was about to go to bed. I saw Evan's name light up my screen, and for one brief, misguided moment, I thought maybe he was calling to check in, to ask how I was holding up, to say he believed me. I picked up and said his name, but the voice that came through wasn't warm, it was clipped, controlled, and already half full of judgment. Claire. Yeah? I just got off the phone with Rachel. I didn't say anything. He continued faster now. She told me about the letter, about the box, about what you're saying Dad left you. Still, I didn't respond, because I knew what was next. She also told me you're accusing the family of manipulation, of fraud. Do you even hear yourself? Finally, I spoke. I'm not accusing. I'm defending. There's a difference. Claire, come on. Don't, I cut in. Don't start this like you're being reasonable. You weren't here. You didn't take care of him. You didn't see what he left behind. You didn't read the damn letter. Because you won't show it to anyone, he snapped. Because it wasn't for anyone. It was for me. There was a pause. A long, cold one. Then he said, You're making Dad look like a liar. That was the moment. That was when something in me cracked. No, Evan, I'm making you look like a coward. There's a difference. Silence. Then, excuse me? You show up at the funeral and act like a martyr. You let Rachel run this narrative, spin this story where I'm the greedy daughter, the manipulator, and you just let her. Because I don't know what's true anymore. Then why didn't you ask me? Why didn't you come here? Why didn't you stay and look him in the eye the last week of his life? He went quiet. But I wasn't done. I held his hand when he could barely breathe. I fed him. I bathed him. I watched his body fail him piece by piece. And you know what he asked me the night before he died? My voice was shaking. He asked me if I'd still be okay if they all hated me for what he left behind. Claire. And I told him I would be, but I'm not, Evan. I'm not okay. I'm alone in this house, being dragged through court, called a thief by my own sister, and now you want to pretend you're the victim in this. He sighed, exhausted. Or maybe just tired of pretending he wasn't complicit. You've always made yourself the center of everything. That one landed deep, right in the oldest wound, the one I'd learned to hide under silence and self-sacrifice. I didn't yell this time. I said it slow, controlled. I made myself the center because no one else would stay there with me. Another long silence, then, maybe we need space. We already had it, Evan, for years. Click. He didn't even say goodbye. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, the phone still in my hand, the last echo of his voice still buzzing in my ear, and I cried. Not a dramatic cry, just tears, soft and slow. The kind that spill out when you realize a door has closed, and this time, it won't open again. It was always me and Evan growing up. Rachel had her rules, her control, but Evan and I, we had something else. Until adulthood turned us into strangers wearing familiar faces. I used to think he was the only one who ever really saw me. Now I wondered if he just saw what he wanted to. The quiet one, the helper, the afterthought who wouldn't fight back. But I was fighting now, even if it meant losing every last person I thought I had. I curled into the blanket on the floor, no lights on, no noise, just me, breathing, barely. And as I drifted into half-sleep, I thought I heard my father's voice. Not words, just presence. And it said something my brother never could. You're not too much. You were just more than they ever learned how to love. I woke up the next morning with a dull ache behind my eyes, the kind you get after crying harder than your body knows how to hold. The silence in the house was different, not peaceful, not lonely, but off, like something was missing, or worse, moved. I walked to the kitchen first, the usual, light flickering above the sink, the fridge humming, a coffee mug still on the table from the night before. Then the hallway. Everything where I left it, except when I climbed the stairs and opened the attic door. Something felt wrong. The box, the one I'd hauled down days ago, where I'd first found the letter, the key, the folder marked in Dad's scrawl, was still there. But it was open, papers scattered, folders half closed, some upside down, others missing completely. I froze in the doorway. My heart started racing. Not the kind of fear that screams, the kind that whispers, "Someone's been here." I dropped to my knees and began digging. One file folder labeled Insurance, 2013. Opened, contents gone. Another envelope that had once held bank records, now torn down the side, completely empty. The letter from Dad? Still there. But the key? Gone. I pressed my hands into the carpeted attic floor and tried to breathe. Someone had been in this house, in this room, gone through my father's memories like they had a right, and they'd taken the one thing that could have opened the safety deposit box without a fight. I didn't have to wonder who. Rachel had never needed to get her hands dirty. But Evan? Maybe after our phone call. Or maybe someone he told. Maybe it was a hired hand. Or maybe, worst of all, someone who still had a key to the house. I stood up and backed out of the room like it was on fire. Downstairs, I locked every door, bolted every window, turned off every light. Then I curled up in the corner of the living room, arms wrapped around my knees, and tried not to cry. But it wasn't sadness that took over. It was violation. This house was the one place I thought I still had some control. Now it felt like a stage set, and I was being watched. Somewhere between rage and panic, I must have fallen asleep, because when I opened my eyes, it wasn't morning anymore, and I wasn't in the living room. Not really. I was 12, sitting at the dinner table. Spaghetti night. Mom was telling me to stop slouching. Rachel was complaining that her sauce was watery. And Evan? Evan was laughing at something Dad had said, and the sound was so full, so easy, like the world hadn't cracked yet. Then it shifted. Same table, different tone. I was 15. Rachel called me a bleeding heart because I cried during a documentary. Mum rolled her eyes. "You need thicker skin, Claire. This world will eat you alive." Dad sat silently until I looked at him. He reached under the table and squeezed my hand. Tight, but warm. The dream shifted again. I was in the attic, same room, but the box was glowing, a strange blue light pulsing out of it. I opened it. Inside was nothing but silence, actual silence, like I could hear the absence of sound. And then I saw myself, a mirror in the bottom of the box, me staring up, eyes wide, mouth closed, like even in the memory, I'd forgotten how to scream. I woke up gasping, hands trembling, forehead damp. The living room was still, too still. I stood slowly and walked to the attic again. The box was unchanged, but I wasn't. Something about that dream had rearranged something in me. The memory of my younger self, silenced, outnumbered, outloved. It wasn't just a symbol, it was the root of everything. For years I'd been telling myself that if I just stayed calm enough, helpful enough, invisible enough, they'd eventually see me, but all it had ever done was teach them how to ignore me better. And now they were trying to erase me from my own story. I wouldn't let them. I sat back down with what papers I had left, and I wrote everything I remembered about the key, the documents, the letter. I took photos, made backups, contacted a lawyer, someone from out of town. Then I called the bank again, not to plead this time, but to ask for their legal compliance officer's name and mailing address. They could stall, but I'd build a case while they did. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was done begging to be believed. 3 days. That's how long I waited before anything moved. 3 days of silence, of second-guessing, of pacing around the house like it might answer the questions no one else would. Then I got the call. It wasn't from the bank, not directly. It was from someone I hadn't heard from in almost a decade. Maya Chen. We'd met in college. She was pre-law, I was English lit. Both of us sarcastic and full of caffeine and too many feelings for our own good. We lost touch after graduation. She'd moved to DC, then California. Last I heard, she was working for a firm that specialized in estate disputes. Apparently my voicemail had gotten to her through a mutual friend. She called me from a number I didn't recognize. Claire? Maya? I heard you're in a mess. I've got 20 minutes and a dangerous amount of legal fury. Let's go. I told her everything. Quickly, but not carelessly. The letter from Dad, the safe deposit box, the missing key, Rachel's petition, the break-in. She didn't interrupt, not once. And when I finished, she exhaled slowly. Okay, I can't get you full access to the box right now, but I can help you file an emergency request to view and document the contents for preservation. How? Because your name is on it, your father signed it, and you have digital proof. If they fight it, we escalate. If they stall, we apply pressure. Maya. What? Why are you helping me? Silence for a second. Then, because 10 years ago, when my dad left, and I was drinking too much and skipping class, you let me crash on your couch for 2 weeks and never asked me to explain. This is me, remembering that. 48 hours later, I was standing inside the vault at the downtown branch. A bank officer stood beside me. Maya had flown in that morning, now standing with a legal pad in one hand, her phone recording a time-stamped video in the other. They unlocked the drawer, pulled out the metal box, set it in front of me. I expected it to be heavy. It wasn't. It looked ordinary, until I opened it. There were 5 items. A sealed envelope labeled, "Only open when they turn on you." A notarized letter, my father's handwriting again, titled, "Supplemental Will Statement, Unfiled." A USB drive in a plastic sleeve. A small velvet pouch, inside a gold locket. A handwritten note, just 1 line. There's more to truth than facts. I started with the letter. It was dated 2 months before he died, notarized by someone I didn't recognize, a small-town notary office from 2 counties over. The letter stated, in clear terms, that Dad intended to revise his will to give me not just the house, but 25% of the company shares. He cited my unpaid and long-term caretaking as part of the rationale, along with Rachel's conflict of interest in managing the family business. There was no bitterness in the letter, just clarity. I looked up at Maya. She nodded, lips pressed in a hard line. If this had been filed officially, things would be very different right now. Can we still use it? We can try, if not in probate, then in public pressure. Next, the USB. It contained scanned documents, emails between Dad and the estate lawyer, several drafts of a revised will, a spreadsheet showing the timeline of Rachel's withdrawals from the company account, some of them questionable. One file caught my eye. Evan wire transfer to Jan 223.pdf. I opened it. A $15,000 transfer from Rachel's company account to Evan, labeled consulting. My stomach turned. I looked at Maya. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The velvet pouch came next. The locket was old, delicate, feminine, gold leaf etching around the edges. I opened it carefully. Inside, 2 photos. One was of me at age 5, sitting in Dad's lap, both of us laughing, ice cream smeared on my face. The other, An ultrasound, labeled Claire, 1993, my birth year, my name. I couldn't breathe for a second. It wasn't just jewelry, it was proof. Proof that I wasn't forgotten, that I wasn't an accident, that I mattered enough to be carried in something small and sacred. I stared at it for a long time. Then, finally, I picked up the last thing, the sealed envelope. Only open when they turn on you. I didn't open it. Not yet. Because just knowing it existed, knowing my father knew what would happen, that was enough to break something inside me and build something new in its place. We left the vault with photos, scans, and a mountain of new questions. But one thing was certain now. They could call me a freeloader, a manipulator, a thief. But my father, he'd called me his safeguard, and I wasn't done protecting what he left behind. Not even close. The first thing I noticed when I pulled into the driveway was the mailbox, bent, leaning sideways like it had been hit, not hard enough to break, but just enough to send a message. Inside was a crumpled flyer, no return address, no name, just 2 words scrawled in red Sharpie, gold digger. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just stood there, staring at it, because this was the part no one talks about when they tell you to stand your ground. They don't warn you about the quiet punishments, the passive-aggressive bruises from people who smile in public and wound you in private. I went inside, locked the door behind me, dropped my keys on the counter, and tried to pretend I didn't hear the ringing in my ears. There were more. A note slipped under the front door. Your dad's rolling in his grave. An anonymous DM on Instagram. You're disgusting. Taking advantage of a dying man. Hope it was worth it. Even a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. You ruined your family. Enjoy the money, bitch. I turned my phone off, left it on the kitchen table, and sat in silence. The house felt too big. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like judgment. Every family photo felt like a lie. Even the walls, once warm, once full of whispers and late-night laughter, now felt like they were leaning in, watching me, waiting to see if I'd fall apart. So I did, not all at once, but slowly, quietly. I curled up on the floor of the living room with a blanket wrapped around me, like armor, and I sobbed, the kind of sobbing that doesn't care if anyone hears, the kind that comes from the bone-deep realization that you really might be alone in the world. I thought about calling Maya, but what would I even say? Hey, can you legally defend me against emotional annihilation? So I just lay there, letting the weight settle, letting the dark press down on me until it felt like part of my skin. At some point, maybe hours later, I sat up, wiped my face, and walked to the table where I'd left the sealed envelope from Dad. Only open when they turn on you. I held it in my hands for a long time, not because I was scared of what it said, but because part of me didn't want to admit I needed it, that I'd hit the point he'd predicted, that I was at the exact edge he'd seen coming. But I opened it, slowly, and inside was a letter, written in ink, not typed, long, messy, emotional, like he'd written it in one sitting, without edits, just truth. Claire, if you're reading this, then things have gone the way I feared. And I hate that I was right. I want you to know, I didn't choose you because you were the most convenient. I chose you because you were the only one who ever really looked me in the eye when I was hurting. You saw me, even when I didn't want to be seen. You made me feel like I still mattered when my body started to fail me. You stayed when everyone else built excuses. You gave me dignity, Claire. And that's something no money, no will, no inheritance could ever match. I know they'll call you names. I know they'll twist the story. But you have to remember this. You're not crazy. You're not selfish. You're not wrong. They only say those things because they can't control you anymore. Whatever happens next, fight if you must. Walk away if you need. But never forget what I saw when I looked at you, even on my worst days. Strength. Compassion. A stubborn, brilliant light that they tried to snuff out and failed. Don't let them dim you, sweetheart. Not now, not ever. Dad. I held the letter to my chest and cried again. But this time, it was different. Not a collapse, but a release. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person, even from beyond the grave, to remind you that you are not what they call you, that your worth is not measured by the voices that shout the loudest, but by the one that whispered, "You stayed." I spent the rest of the night on the floor, but I wasn't defeated anymore. I wasn't broken. I was quiet, still. And somewhere in that stillness, something took root. Something small, but strong. I didn't need to be their version of the story. I didn't need their permission to hold on to the truth. Because the truth was mine. And it was enough. I woke up still on the floor. The blanket wrapped around me had twisted during the night, half tucked beneath my legs, half draped over my shoulder like a tired promise. The letter from Dad was beside me, crinkled now from where my hand had gripped it tight, like I was holding on to him in my sleep. I didn't move right away. Just lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, the same ceiling I grew up under, the same one I'd memorized during all those nights I couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe, couldn't belong. But this morning, it didn't feel like it was pressing down on me. It just was. The house was quiet, but not heavy. Not anymore. More like still. Still in a way that made space. Not silence as punishment, but silence as peace. I slowly sat up. My body ached, not just from the hardwood floor or the cramped sleep, but from something deeper, a fatigue I'd been carrying in my bones for years, maybe decades, and yet I felt something else under it now. Something tiny, unsteady, but real. Hope? No, not quite, but maybe. The idea that hope could live here again. I padded into the kitchen, barefoot. Didn't even glance toward the phone still resting on the table. No calls today. No checking messages. No letting other people's voices rewrite my reality. I made tea instead of coffee. That might sound small, but to me, it was seismic. Coffee was what I drank to survive. Tea, that was what I drank when I was allowed to feel. I chose a blend Dad used to keep around, even though Mum thought it was too floral. Chamomile, lavender, and something I couldn't name, maybe lemon balm. I let it steep too long. I didn't care. I sat at the kitchen table, wrapped my hands around the mug, and looked out the window at the backyard. Overgrown now, but still ours, still mine. There was no dramatic swell of music, no cinematic moment of transformation, just breath. A long, full breath that didn't hitch at the end. I grabbed a pen from the drawer, pulled out the back page of an old phone bill, and wrote one sentence across the top. I will not shrink again. I didn't know what else I was yet. Not brave, not healed, not whole. But I knew what I wasn't anymore. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't apologizing for taking up space in a house my father gave me. I wasn't begging to be seen by people who had already decided I was invisible. I let the tea go cold, and then made another cup. Not because I needed it, but because it tasted like choice. I spent the rest of the morning in quiet. Didn't turn on the TV. Didn't scroll. Didn't let the world in. I just sat with myself. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel unbearable. It felt like company. That afternoon, I took the letter from Dad and slipped it into a fresh folder, one I labeled in bold Sharpie, Reality, not Rachel's version. Underneath that, I added, I stayed. I cared. I remember. I didn't know where this was going yet. Didn't know how the legal fight would unfold. Didn't know if Evan would ever speak to me again. Didn't know if the rest of the family would ever stop believing the story Rachel spun so easily. But I did know one thing. If I kept waiting for them to give me peace, I'd wait forever. I'd have to build it myself, brick by quiet brick. The knock came just after 4 p.m. 3 short taps. No doorbell. No text first, the kind of knock that made me freeze, not from fear, from pattern recognition. Because in this house, unexpected knocks were never good news. I walked slowly to the front door, heart already beginning its quiet drumbeat against my ribs. I checked through the peephole. It took me a moment to recognize her. Megan, my cousin, Rachel's niece, daughter of Uncle Lou, who always got too drunk at Thanksgiving and called me the sensitive one, like it was a diagnosis. I hadn't seen Megan in nearly 3 years. The last time was at Aunt Marie's funeral. She'd worn black combat boots under her dress and had barely looked me in the eye. And now here she was, standing on my porch, holding a mason jar full of what looked like soup. I opened the door. We just stared at each other. Neither of us spoke, until finally I said, "Hi." She lifted the jar slightly. I made lentil soup, from scratch. It's still hot. I wasn't sure if... You want to come in? She blinked, then nodded. I stepped aside. Megan had always been the quiet one, like me, but in a different way. She was guarded. I was just trained not to interrupt. She wandered into the kitchen and stood awkwardly by the table, still holding the soup like it might shield her from whatever came next. I took it from her and placed it gently on the counter. Want some tea? Only if it's the weird kind you used to make at sleepovers, I smiled. Still my specialty. We sat at the kitchen table, in a silence that was more hesitant than hostile. She stirred her tea. I watched the steam rise. Neither of us knew where to start. So as usual, I broke first. You didn't come here just to bring soup. No. Rachel sent you. Her eyes flicked up, sharp. God, no. She'd murder me if she knew I was here. I raised an eyebrow. She added, which is probably the main reason I came. That made me laugh, a real one. And she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I've been hearing a lot, she said quietly. From Rachel, from my dad, from basically every family group chat I've muted since 2021. Let me guess, I'm the villain now. Honestly, half of them think you're a genius scam artist. The other half think you've had a breakdown. That tracks. But me? I wasn't sure what to think. Not until I saw that photo you posted. Which one? The locket, with the ultrasound. She paused. I remembered that locket, from when we were little. Aunt Lorna showed it to me once and told me it was for the good daughter. I thought she meant Rachel. That stopped me cold. Wait. Mom said that? She nodded. I didn't get it then, but when I saw that it was yours, when I saw your name on the ultrasound, she looked down at her mug. I realized maybe this whole time people were just lying with a straight face and calling it family. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear dropped onto my wrist. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have reached out sooner. You were always kind to me when I was younger. You never talked down to me like the others. I didn't want to believe you'd turn out like they said. Thank you for coming, I said, voice shaky. Even if it's late, it means something. We sat in silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was careful, like two people trying to walk across a frozen lake, hoping the ice would hold. Eventually, I stood up and walked to the drawer where I kept the folder with Dad's letter. I didn't hand her everything, just a photocopy of the first page, his signature, the date, and the line where he wrote, "Claire has taken on the burden of care and deserves to be protected." I passed it to her slowly. She read it in full, then folded it carefully and slid it back across the table. "He really loved you," she said. I nodded. I just wish more of them believed it didn't come at their expense. Before she left, Megan hugged me. It wasn't dramatic, just solid, present. The kind of hug that says, "You're not crazy, I see you." As she walked out the door, she turned back. If you ever want someone to sit with you in court, or even just walk through the grocery store with, so people stop staring, I'm in. After she left, I sat back down. My tea had gone cold again, but I drank it anyway. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel entirely alone. I hadn't opened the hallway closet in years. It was the kind of closet no one ever organized, the catch-all space for forgotten things. Old board games, expired medicine, tangled Christmas lights, and boxes labeled in handwriting that had faded to smudges. Somewhere in there, buried behind a dusty humidifier and an unopened electric blanket, was my old blue storage bin. It was heavier than I remembered. Inside, journals, loose papers, hospital name tags, sticky notes with scribbled appointment times, a list of Dad's prescriptions from 2 winters ago, a napkin with "Don't forget to feed Pepper" in his handwriting. Pepper had been gone for over a year. I pressed the napkin to my chest for a moment, that familiar pang in my throat rising like it always did when his memory came uninvited and too gently to push away. I pulled the bin into the living room and sat cross-legged in front of it, like I was preparing to unbox a part of myself I'd sealed shut. Because that's what this was, a time capsule. Not just of caregiving, but of becoming invisible. The first journal I picked up was navy blue, fraying at the spine. The date on the inside, February 2022. I flipped through pages. Some were scrawled and angry, notes I'd written after fights with Rachel or after long nights spent monitoring Dad's oxygen levels. Others were soft, quiet observations, moments I thought I'd lost. Like this one, March 3rd. Dad asked me if the sky looked purple or just cloudy. I said cloudy. He said, "Then I guess I'll pretend it's purple." We sat in silence for 10 minutes. It was the closest I've felt to peace in weeks. I didn't realize I was crying until the tears fell onto the ink. The next item, an old MP3 player. I plugged it into my laptop, not expecting much. But it lit up, barely hanging on. In the folder labeled Voice Memos, I found 3 saved files. I clicked on the first one. Static. And then, "Hey, it's me. Just wanted to say thanks, kiddo. Don't know what I'd do without you." My father's voice, scratchy, worn, but unmistakably his. I closed my eyes, let it play again, and again, until the ache in my chest softened just enough to let me breathe through it. I took a screenshot of the sound wave, printed it, taped it above my desk with a single word underneath. Proof. Not for the court, not for Rachel, not for Evan, not even for Maya. For me. Because somewhere along the way, I'd started questioning my own memory. When people lie to you long enough, you start asking if maybe you are the villain. If maybe you did imagine the kindness, the connection, the unspoken promises. But now I had receipts. I opened a blank document and titled it, "Truth They Can't Erase," and I began to write. Not legal arguments, not affidavits, just reality. The day Mom told me I was too emotional to be taken seriously. The afternoon Rachel told a neighbor I was staying for free, while I sat inside calculating Dad's medication copays. The night Evan suggested I was projecting guilt when I asked him to pick up groceries for Dad. The voicemail where Dad called me his anchor. The way his hand squeezed mine in the hospital. The way he said my name, like it meant something. By the time I stopped typing, it was dark outside. The lamp cast a soft glow over the room, and the bin beside me looked smaller, not because I'd emptied it, but because I no longer feared what was inside. I understood something now. I had been cast as the freeloader because I didn't fit the story they needed to tell. A quiet woman, caretaker, not flashy, not ruthless, just present. Too present, present enough to be inconvenient. But inconvenient people aren't villains, they're witnesses, and I wasn't going to unsee what I knew. I wasn't going to let them narrate over me anymore. Not because I needed revenge, but because I needed relief. Maya texted me at 10:23 a.m. "You up for meeting someone who knows what it's like to be silenced by family?" I stared at the message. then typed back, "Depends. Am I being ambushed?" Her response came with a laughing emoji. "Nope, just tea." A voice recorder, and someone who actually listens. The cafe was in the arts district, all exposed brick and recycled wood tables, with plants dangling from pipes like urban vines. I hadn't worn makeup, didn't brush my hair beyond a half-hearted twist. I didn't want to show up polished. I wanted to show up real. Because if someone was going to hear my story, I needed them to hear me, not a performance. She was already there when I arrived, a woman in her late 50s, grey-streaked hair in a braid, notebook open, steaming cup of something herbal at her elbow. She stood as I approached, offered her hand. "Claire, I'm Joe." Her voice was low, textured, the kind of voice that made you want to lean in. We sat. Maya nodded to me reassuringly, then slid into the seat beside Joe. "I'll stay quiet unless you want me to jump in," she said. I nodded. I appreciated that. Joe tapped her recorder, then asked softly, "You ready?" I hesitated. Then I said the truest thing I could. "I've never been more ready to be misquoted, but I'm trying to trust that I won't be." Joe smiled gently. "I don't twist stories, I hold them. If that ever changes, you walk." And so I began. Not with the will, not with the fight. Not even with Rachel. I began with my dad's voice. He once left me a voicemail just to say thanks. No agenda, no guilt, just thanks. Then I told her about the final year, the way caregiving swallowed identity, the way family didn't step in. They stepped back. I told her about the safe deposit box, the letter, the ultrasound in the locket. Jo didn't interrupt. She didn't take many notes either, just the occasional word or phrase. Most of the time she looked right at me, eyes sharp, but kind, like she was cataloguing truth, not facts, truth. At one point I paused, throat thick with something I hadn't spoken aloud before. I wasn't trying to get anything, I just didn't want to disappear. She nodded slowly. That's the quiet grief, isn't it? Not the loss of the person, but the loss of your place after they're gone. I swallowed hard. Yeah, exactly. After almost 2 hours, she turned off the recorder. We sat in the calm, no rush to leave, just space. Then Jo said, "I'm not here to make anyone a villain, but I am here to make sure women like you stop being erased." She paused. "Would you be okay if I publish this anonymously at first? Let people read it as a story, not as gossip." "What do you mean?" "I don't want your name to become clickbait. I want it to become a mirror." That line hit me. A mirror. Because yes, I wanted justice. But more than that, I wanted resonance. For someone else out there, curled on their own floor with their own truth in their hands, to read this and think, "I'm not crazy, I'm not weak, I'm not alone." I said yes. Jo smiled, slid her notebook into her bag. "You're not a freeloader, Claire." She stood. "You're a damn lighthouse." When she left, Maya stayed behind. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then Maya looked at me sideways. "You just changed someone's mind today." "Whose?" "Mine," she said, grinning. "You're tougher than I thought." I laughed. "You've always underestimated quiet women." "Fair. But now I know. You're the kind that burns slow and deep." I went home that night, not triumphant, but true, and that was better. It started with a drawer, the junk drawer to be exact. You know the one, the messy space where old batteries go to die, where keys with no known lock multiply like regrets, where dried-out pens and half-burned birthday candles live side by side in quiet chaos. I emptied it. Every last item. Not because I needed to organize it, but because I needed to decide what stayed. And that's how it began. Not a dramatic makeover, not a symbolic ritual. Just one drawer, one choice. From there, it was the bookshelf. I removed every business book Dad never actually read, but kept because Rachel said they made him look successful. They didn't spark anything but resentment. So I boxed them up, donated them. The shelf felt lighter, and so did I. The guest room, the one Mum always insisted stay neutral in case someone important visited, got its first splash of colour since 2002. I painted one wall a deep forest green. The brushstrokes were uneven. I didn't care. It looked like growth, like something alive had finally claimed space. Then came the living room, the photo wall. I took down every framed image where I was in the background, blurred, half-turned, an afterthought. I replaced them with 2 new ones. Me and Dad sitting on the porch during his last birthday. We were laughing, unfiltered, unposed. Me, solo, standing on a rocky beach from a trip I took alone 2 years ago. Wind in my hair, head held high. No apologies. I lit candles that smelled like cedar and ash, like the woods we used to walk through behind the house when I was a teenager. I moved the couch to face the window instead of the TV. I opened the windows even though it was chilly. And then I built something. In the corner near the fireplace, I cleared a small space. I laid down one of Dad's old flannel shirts, set a smooth stone I'd kept from our last hike on top of it, placed the ultrasound photo in a frame, hung the gold locket gently from a small hook, and propped up his handwritten letter, folded but visible. It wasn't a shrine. It was a remembering. I whispered, "You're still here." And for once, it didn't feel like pretending. That night, I cooked for myself. Real food, not toast, not takeout. Roasted vegetables, garlic, lemon, and a salad with greens I actually washed instead of pulling straight from the bag. I ate at the kitchen table, alone, with a cloth napkin. Because I deserved to be cared for, even by my own hands. After dinner, I played music. Not sad songs, just something soft and strange and beautiful. Something that sounded like a beginning. And when I went to bed, in sheets I'd finally washed, in pajamas not meant for shame or hiding, I lay there and listened. To the hum of the heater, to the wind through the window crack, to my own breathing. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't bracing for the next hurt. I wasn't waiting to be called dramatic or lazy or ungrateful. I wasn't shrinking to fit. I was here, in my house, in my skin, in my truth, and I was choosing all of it. The cemetery was quiet, not silent, just still. The way some places get when time feels like it's pressing pause. The gravel crunched beneath my boots as I walked. It had rained the day before, so the air smelled like wet leaves and iron. I hadn't been here in years, not since the funeral, not since I stood beside Rachel while she wept like she was auditioning for sainthood, and I just stood still, unsure whether I was mourning a person or the fantasy I kept trying to force her into. My mother's headstone was smaller than I remembered, simple. Just her name, 2 dates, and a quote I didn't choose. She always gave her best. I wanted to laugh, not out of cruelty, out of exhaustion, because what she gave, she never gave to me. I stood there for a long time, hands in my coat pockets, no tears, just thoughts. And then, finally, I said it out loud. "You never chose me." Not accusing, not bitter, just honest. Then I added softer, "But I choose me now." I took out a folded piece of paper from my coat, a page torn from my journal. I read it quietly, like a prayer, even though it wasn't one. "I will not carry your silence anymore. I will not shrink to keep the peace you never gave me. I release you, and I release the version of me that spent her life trying to make you proud. I'm not proud. I'm free." I placed the page under a small rock beside the grave. Let the wind have the rest. When I walked away, it felt like I was lighter by at least 10 pounds. The ache was still there, but it had shifted. No longer a wound, more like a scar, a reminder that I survived her. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the nursing home where I'd once worked part-time. Back when I needed extra cash and needed to feel useful, even to strangers. I wasn't sure why I went. Just a pull. A thread I followed. I signed in. Told the front desk I used to volunteer here. The receptionist smiled. "You're Claire, right? Mrs. Edgerton still talks about you." "She's still here. Room 108. You should stop in, she'll be thrilled." I walked down the hallway, feeling like I was moving through a past life. Everything smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and overcooked peas. But then I turned the corner, and there she was. Mrs. Edgerton. 91 now, hair thinner, eyes a little foggier. But smile? Unchanged. "Well, I'll be damned," she whispered. "My tea angel," I laughed. "You remember that. You brought me chamomile and let me rant about my ungrateful grandson. Of course I remember. We talked for half an hour. I told her I'd been going through things. Didn't get specific. Didn't need to. At one point, she reached across the blanket covering her lap and touched my hand. "You had a calm about you, even then," she said. "Like someone who knew pain but didn't lead with it." My throat tightened. "Is that a good thing?" She squeezed my hand. "It's a rare thing." When I left, she called after me. "Don't let them rewrite you, sweetheart. Not when you've worked this hard to write yourself." Outside, the sun was setting. Not in a blaze of glory, just a slow fade. Soft, steady, sure. And as I walked to my car, I realized something. I didn't need everyone to understand me. I didn't need to win every fight. I didn't need Rachel's apology or Evan's silence to break. What I needed was what I was finally giving myself. Permission, peace, and the grace to start again. It had been exactly 43 days since I first read Dad's letter, since the night I collapsed on the floor, clutched it like a lifeline, and felt the sharp ache of being seen, and the deeper ache of being too late to answer back. Now, I sat at the same kitchen table, steam curling from a chipped mug, a single candle flickering in the corner. The house quiet, but not silent. More like waiting. Waiting for me to speak. I pulled a fresh notebook from the drawer. Not the tattered one I usually use to jot down grocery lists or memories that came like lightning bolts. This one was new, untouched, and that felt right. I titled the first page, "To Dad, not to remember you, but to meet you where I'm." Then I took a breath and began. "Dear Dad, you once wrote to me that I had carried more than anyone saw. You said I deserved peace, that I had been your anchor. I want you to know I believed you. Even when they didn't. Even when I didn't. But I've learned something since then. Love, real love, doesn't just see you. It fights for you. It stands up when others try to shrink you. And while I know you loved me, I've had to accept this truth. You didn't always protect me. You didn't stop Mom when she used silence as a weapon. You didn't confront Rachel when she lied about me, year after year. You didn't make space for me in the stories this family told about who was good and who was ungrateful. You loved me privately, but in public, you let the narrative run over me. And that broke something in me. I used to think that if I could just prove myself, the story would change. I stayed. I cleaned your wounds. I picked up your medications. I carried your grief alongside mine. And still, when you died, I became a footnote. The freeloader, the failure, the one who must have manipulated you. Dad, I want to scream sometimes, not because of the will, but because I spent so many years waiting for someone, anyone, to say, "Claire, I see you, I believe you." And you were the only one who ever did. But it came too late. It came after you were already gone. Still I am grateful. Not just for the letter, but for every small, quiet moment that no one else bothered to remember. The time you asked me to play your favorite jazz record, and we just sat there, no words. The night you told me, "I know you didn't choose this, but you stayed anyway." And that's love. The time you asked if the clouds looked purple. They did. They still do sometimes. I want you to know what I've done since you left. I cleared the house, not because I wanted to forget, but because I needed to make room for something new. I spoke to a journalist, not to get attention, but to reclaim my voice. I walked away from people who still refused to look me in the eye, and I did it without begging for their understanding. And I stood at Mum's grave, and I let her go, because I couldn't carry her silence anymore. But most of all, I've started seeing myself not as the person they called me, but as the person I actually am. Not a burden, not a failure, not a freeloader, but someone who showed up, someone who stayed, someone who cared, even when it hurt, even when it cost me everything. And you know what, Dad? I'm done trying to be palatable. I'm done shrinking. I'm done pretending the past didn't leave marks. I carry them now, not as shame, but as proof that I survived. So thank you. Thank you for seeing me, even if it took you too long to say it out loud. Thank you for loving me, even if you didn't always know how to shield me. But now I love myself enough to do what you didn't, to speak up, to protect my peace, to belong. Even if I'm the only one who says I do, I'm going to fight for what's mine, not out of vengeance, out of truth, because truth deserves roots, not just whispers. And this house, this name, this story, it's mine to finish. Love, Claire. I signed it, dated it, folded it, and placed it in the same folder that held his letter to me, side by side, two halves of the same unfinished conversation, but not unfinished anymore. This time I got to speak back. It was Rachel's idea to meet at Uncle Lou's house. Neutral ground, she said, familiar, safe. Safe for whom, I wondered. I hadn't stepped foot in that house since before Dad got sick. It smelled the same. Old leather, wood polish, and whatever cologne Uncle Lou used that made every room feel like a boardroom. There were about 9 of us crammed into the living room. Rachel, Evan, Uncle Lou, Aunt Denise, Megan, 2 cousins I barely knew, Maya at my side, quiet, steady, and me, the accused, or maybe just the inconvenient witness. Rachel took the lead, as she always did. Hair perfectly blown out, blouse crisp white, voice pitched with performative restraint. We're here today because Claire's choices have put the family in an impossible position. She looked at me like I was a misbehaving child. None of us want to make this uglier than it already is. But we have to be realistic. You manipulated Dad. You isolated him from the rest of us. You lived in his house rent-free for years, and now you want to take everything. She folded her hands. That's not right. That's not fair. I waited. Let the silence linger. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. The one with his letter, the ultrasound photo, my journal printout with his voice memo transcription, and copies of utility bills with my name on them. Not rent-free, not invisible. I didn't come here to argue, I said quietly. I came here to stop letting people talk for me. I opened the letter. Read aloud the one line I knew would sting. Claire has carried the burden. She has earned my trust, my respect, and my support. I looked up. That's what he wrote, in his own handwriting. And I don't need anyone in this room to approve of that. I just need you to stop rewriting it. Rachel scoffed. Anyone can forge a letter. Maya spoke then. It's been verified, dated, witnessed, notarized. The room shifted. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Of course you believe her. You've always coddled her. Megan cleared her throat. All heads turned. No one coddled Claire. They just finally started listening. Rachel blinked. Excuse me? I visited her last month, Megan said. I saw the house, the records, the care logs, the voicemail from Uncle Dave where he thanked her for handling Dad's hospice arrangements because none of us showed up. Silence. She didn't isolate him, Megan added. We just didn't show up, and now we're angry she was the only one who did. Uncle Lou muttered something about emotional theatrics. I turned to him, calm and direct. You used to call me sensitive like it was a disease. But maybe I was just tuned in to things you chose to ignore. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. because for the first time, I wasn't here to convince him. I turned to Rachel. You've spent years performing sainthood, but the truth is, you abandoned your father emotionally. And now you're furious that he saw the difference. Her face flushed red. I was working. I had a family. So did I said. Even if it was just me and him, that still counts. Evan looked down at his lap. He hadn't said a word. I met his gaze. You said once that I made things harder by being emotional. But let me ask you something. What's harder, feeling things or pretending they don't exist? He didn't answer. But he didn't look away. I gathered my papers. I'm not asking for your understanding, and I don't need your blessing. I looked around the room. I came because I wanted each of you to hear the truth from me, not filtered through someone else's resentment. I stood. This story isn't yours to reshape. It's mine, and I'm done letting you borrow it. As I turned to leave, Megan rose too. I'll walk with you, she said. The door clicked behind us. I felt the breath I'd been holding for years finally exhale. Outside, the air was sharp with the bite of early fall. Megan slipped her hands in her pockets. That was brutal. Yeah, I said, but necessary. She smiled faintly. They'll talk, you know that. Let them. I looked up at the sky, still cloudy, but no longer heavy. The truth doesn't need their permission. The envelope was heavier than it should have been, cream-colored, embossed seal. My name typed cleanly across the front. It had arrived 2 days after the mediation. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I made a cup of tea, lit a candle, sat in the same armchair I'd napped in during so many of Dad's doctor visits. I wanted the moment to be still, because whatever the envelope said, this was the last time I'd read it as not knowing. Maya sat across from me, her laptop closed, her expression neutral but kind. You ready? I nodded. Opened it. I scanned the words like they were in a language I half remembered from college. Summary judgment. Claire Whitman retains full legal right to the property deed to 1226 Linden Avenue, financial assets left in her father's private account, personal effects specified in the handwritten letter dated April 17th, legal standing as next of kin and executor. Petition to contest the will has been denied. My shoulders dropped. Not in relief exactly, more like release. I looked up at Maya. So that's it? That's it. They can appeal, but it won't go anywhere. Not with this documentation. I nodded. She waited. You're quiet. I don't feel triumphant, I said. You weren't supposed to, she replied gently. Later that night, I sat with the checkbook, the bank passwords, the deed, the list of things that were mine now. And all I could think was, winning felt very different when no one celebrated with you. Rachel had already texted once since the ruling. A single line. I hope you're proud of what you've done. I didn't answer, because I wasn't proud. I was clear. I was honest. I was standing in my truth. But proud? No. The next morning, I met with the estate attorney to finalize the transfer paperwork. He slid over a form asking whether I wanted to pursue back rent, legal damages, or defamation claims. I stared at it for a long moment, then pushed it back. No. Are you sure? He asked. There's a good case here. You could... I don't want to win like that, I interrupted. I already took back the one thing they never thought I would. My voice. When I told Maya later, she raised an eyebrow. You really are a better person than me. I'm not better, I said. I'm just tired. She smiled sadly. Tired can still be powerful. On the way home, I stopped at a red light and noticed a mural on the side of a building I'd never paid attention to before. It read, "Healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the moment you stop explaining yourself." I took a photo of it, printed it, taped it above my desk, and then I did something simple. I bought myself flowers. A bouquet of eucalyptus and small yellow blooms whose name I didn't know. I placed them on the mantel, next to the framed photo of me and Dad on the porch. No celebration, no party, just recognition. The truth had been buried. But now it had roots. Grief doesn't vanish after justice. It just changes shape. Now that the court ruling was behind me and the family had retreated into a predictable, icy silence, the space was finally mine. But that space felt too quiet. So I filled it, not with noise, but with intention. I started in Dad's study, the room that had once held his old filing cabinets, a wall calendar from 2016, and 3 different mugs with cracked handles. I cleared it all out, donated the office chair, recycled the files, kept only 2 things: his favorite pen, a Polaroid of him grinning with a ridiculous foam finger at a minor league baseball game we once went to. Then I painted the walls a soft slate blue, hung a floating shelf, put up a corkboard, bought a second-hand desk from a woman who said, "Good stories have been written on this thing." I told her, I plan to add 1 more. This room, my new writing space, became sacred. Not because it was perfect, but because no one else had ever claimed it for me. Every morning, I lit incense, opened the windows, played music low enough to hear my thoughts between the lyrics, and I wrote. At first it was journal entries, then memories, then letters I never planned to send, to Rachel, to Mum, to myself at age 12. But eventually the words shaped into something larger, an essay, then 2. Then a collection. Maya helped me polish them. Joe, the journalist, offered to publish one as a follow-up. The piece was titled, "Not the Freeloader, What It Means to Stay When No One Sees You." It went online with a note. Author's name shared with permission. This is her story, not her shame. Within a week, emails started coming in. Women from Michigan, Arizona, Brooklyn, Iowa. One line repeated over and over. I thought I was the only one. Some wrote paragraphs, some just sent a heart emoji. One simply wrote, "You put language to my silence, thank you." I started printing them, taping them to the inside of the closet door in the writing room. My secret wall of witness, not for ego, for belonging. And then I took it one step further. I created a monthly circle at the house. Small at first, 5 women, each one a caregiver, a daughter, a survivor of being the strong one too long. We sat on floor cushions, passed tea, shared without fixing. We cried, we laughed, we let each other be messy. One woman, Marlene, brought a candle with her late mother's handwriting etched onto the glass. Another, Tasha, read a poem about growing up with a mother who could recite every Bible verse, but never once said, "I'm sorry." They told me, one by one, that this circle felt like the first thing that wasn't performative, that didn't ask them to turn their pain into productivity. And I realized, maybe I had built something sacred, not just a room, not just a story, but a space, in this house and in myself, where truth didn't have to beg to be believed. One afternoon, I was in the garden behind the house, pulling weeds, planting late-blooming perennials, when Evan showed up, unannounced. He didn't walk into the house, just stood at the gate. I looked up, unsure if I should wave or wait. He raised a hand, held up an envelope. "I read your piece," he said quietly. "And?" I didn't know. I didn't want to know, back then. I nodded. He didn't ask to come in, didn't ask to be forgiven. Just handed me the envelope and said, "I see it now." Then he left. Inside the envelope, a single black and white photo, me and Dad. I didn't even remember it being taken. We were sitting on the back steps. I was maybe 16. My head was on his shoulder. He was laughing. I looked safe. On the back, Evan had written, "You mattered more than we knew." I added the photo to the corkboard. Right in the middle, surrounded by notes from strangers, and one from someone who used to be a stranger to me. The past hadn't changed, but I had. And this home, with its garden and its circle, and its echoes of pain and promise was no longer a site of erasure. It was mine, and I was no longer surviving. I was living. I found the tape by accident, tucked inside an old shoebox in the attic, labeled in Dad's blocky handwriting, Claire, 1997, singing Do Not Erase. I stared at it for a full minute. I hadn't thought about that recording in years, maybe decades. It was probably the cheap kind of cassette that warped with time, but I still searched the house until I found an old player buried in a closet. I dusted it off, inserted the tape, pressed play. Static. Then, "Okay, Claire, ready?" My voice, high-pitched, wobbly, maybe 5 or 6 years old. "Yes." A pause, then a hesitant version of You Are My Sunshine, sung slightly off-key but with absolute conviction. Halfway through, Dad laughed. Not at me. Never at me. It was that laugh that sounded like relief, like joy he didn't always know how to say out loud. At the end of the song, I said, "Did I do good?" And he answered clear as day, "You did perfect." I pressed pause, closed my eyes, let it sink in, not the song, but the memory. A moment when I wasn't trying to prove anything, when love wasn't something I had to earn, when I was just a child, singing, and someone was listening. I sat on the porch after that, sun low, sky golden and streaked with lavender, that soft hush just before night. I thought about every version of myself that had lived in this house, the little girl trying to be invisible so Mum wouldn't snap, the teenager tiptoeing around Rachel's cruelty, the young woman folding towels and holding pills and swallowing resentment, the daughter who stayed when everyone else walked away, and the woman I was now, still carrying scars, but finally owning her story. I opened my journal, wrote my final entry of the year. They called me a freeloader, a failure, a manipulator. But when the roof was leaking, when the truth was buried, when grief turned the walls cold, I was the one who stayed. I was the one who showed up. I was the one who loved him, not for what he gave, but for who he tried to be. That's not freeloading. That's foundation. The wind picked up. A few leaves tumbled across the porch floor. I pulled the blanket tighter around me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed to run from anything. Not my past, not my pain, not even my family's silence. That silence, it wasn't mine to fix anymore. The mailbox creaked as I opened it. Inside, a single card. No return address, just my name, handwritten. I opened it under the porch light. No message, just a sentence written in that same familiar handwriting I'd once resented for its distance. Evans. I see it now. I smiled, not because it changed everything, but because it meant one thing. Telling the truth was worth it. I walked back inside, turned off the lights, locked the door, climbed into bed. And before I closed my eyes, I whispered, "You did perfect." But this time, I was saying it to myself.